So we know that climate change is no longer a distant threat. It's here, following devastating floods in some parts of the country, as well as unpredictable weather patterns. We've seen homes, businesses, infrastructure at large, all having been affected. For South Africa to survive these storms ahead, quite literally and economically, we explore possibilities and probabilities, perhaps also whilst breaking down the news that matters to you in relation to this, the aftermath of these events, and more. So for this conversation, Clifford Mack, Head of Strategic Projects at Nedbank, is going to be weighing in to perhaps explain a little bit further. Clifford, good morning. Welcome to Morning Live, and thanks for your time at this hour.
Good morning, Liesl, and thank you for having me on your show this morning.
So, if we're starting with the bigger picture in the aftermath of what has transpired, let's unpack the incidences that have come to the fore in recent times in KZN, the Eastern Cape, the Western Cape, Gauteng. These are no longer one-time events. So climate change,
Correct.
It's increasing, but there's an intensity to it. There's also, it's occurring more frequently. I wonder if you could speak to the impact it's had on communities and businesses at large. Quantify that loss for us.
Thanks, Liesl. Just if one breaks it down, where we've come from, to your point as you started, we've come from such big weather events that used to happen, say, once in every 10, once in every 15 years. And we're coming to a situation now where we are experiencing huge floods, huge weather-related events that are happening across the country in the metropolitan areas that you highlighted. And what we've seen is the frequency has actually changed from being in such a long period of time to actually happening almost every second year or every year, which is a big trend that's affecting the country at large. And I think what we're seeing is at an individual level, we're seeing households, properties being damaged, being demolished. Businesses are actually having to come to a standstill as a result of that. And ultimately, the impact is that it actually impacts the economy when you actually combine and aggregate it.
And I'm even thinking beyond all of that, and thank you for speaking to that context, but also the approach that, people across the value chain, businesses across the value chain have to now, use and mitigate against because of these phenomena, increasing. How ready are we as a country to mitigate what's ahead? I mean, given what has transpired, what's our state of preparedness look like?
Thanks, Liesl. I guess when we break it down, we have a lot of lessons that we've learned.
Yeah.
Having had these events every year or every second year, what you've seen is across the municipalities, across the provincial governments, there's a lot of preparedness that's starting to kick in. And it starts with the proactive processes that come in with making sure that the societies are actually ready in the event that you actually have such a large weather event. As well as what actually happens post the event actually hit it. So how do you make sure that we've got the repatriation efforts on the ground? There are, service providers, companies on the ground to assist in people that maybe are stuck in certain flood areas. And to those maybe that didn't get the message, how you actually get to those areas to make sure that there is help. So I think what we're seeing is a combination of the before and after process to make sure that the readiness is there. It's making sure helicopters, ambulances, and all of that actually come together. And I think for us as an insurance company, as the insurance industry, what we're certainly taking through is taking a proactive approach. How do we make sure that our clients or our consumers actually get the notifications in advance when the weather events actually happen to make sure that they are aware that it's actually coming? But as you know, human psychology sometimes is because we have frequent notifications that an event might happen. We've seen patterns in the past where there are notifications of potential warnings, but they actually don't materialize.
Clifford, let me come in there because you are speaking to access, and I wonder if you could even speak to the options available for the most vulnerable. I mean, in times of disaster, beyond donations, many South Africans don't have access to comprehensive options, especially in lower income households, rural areas as well. What's been explored on that front?
So what we've seen, I guess from an industry perspective, is firstly the insurance industry playing a role in supporting local governments, whether it's in contributions financially or actually providing assistance to some of the infrastructure that's required to repair in those instances that actually support the areas where low-income households actually reside, and that actually protects the households to be able to cater or be able to cope in those difficult circumstances. We are, as an industry, also looking at different options, building or co-creating insurance solutions that are catered for the low niche industries, for clients that can't afford big premiums. How do you make sure that we actually design solutions that would be able to cater for premiums that are affordable to ensure that they actually gets to a point where everybody has access to insurance?
Well, let's get into that access, because I mean it can't happen in isolation. We're wondering if government is doing enough to work with everyone across the value chain to perhaps protect the most vulnerable, especially in those times of need and when disaster strikes. What's the role of the FSCA? Even if we're looking at the approaches, how does the industry approach, the increasing phenomenon? Should a safety net, be incorporated as an example? Is there insurance fund that needs to be developed for communities that won't be abused? Let's imagine, what are these possibilities and probabilities?
That's such a good question, Lizol. I guess it starts at an industry body level, where all the insurance companies can come together to actually play. And I think a lot of discussions are currently happening at those levels. But we can also take some lessons from countries that have higher frequency and severity of such events that are happening. So let's take examples of countries or states, like if you take New Orleans in Louisiana, or if you take the northern part of Italy, that have had more ravaging floods. Lisa, we were talking about floods and the weather storms that are happening in South Africa every year or every second year. What we're actually seeing in those places, take New Orleans, they get a flood at least twice a year. In northern Italy, they actually get floods 3 times a year. And what we've seen in those places is that government has definitely taken the lead as well in co-creating with insurance companies in those instances to create flood insurance. So that's definitely something to pay attention to into the future. But I think in those instances where government had to step in was because the local insurance companies were not able to cope with just the sheer volume of the claims. I think with where we are in South Africa at the moment, our local insurance companies are well capitalized. They are able to cater for the claims that are coming through. We remain being able to pay all our claims that are coming through. So if you look at that journey, we're still at the point where the industry is strong enough to cater for the claims that we have. But I think as time goes by, to increase and ensure to answer how we deal with the issue around access will definitely take into account the evolution of the severity of the claims that need to get paid and how the government and insurance can work together to develop such solutions. I mean, if you take it, Lisa, let's take, we have SASRIA that takes care of insurance for instances where there's like large riots, and that protects individuals and businesses. So there's definitely a clue for us to think about into the future, looking at how we do that for floods.
Yeah, it's about rebuilding, recovery, but also just resilience at large, and balancing corporate social responsibility with profits as well. And I wonder if we look at where to from here, considering just, the science behind it, the data collection in rural areas, perhaps some of the risk assessments as well from here. And just as we wrap up quickly, what can we expect from you in the near future, working with other stakeholders, scientists, meteorologists, government, other industry bodies, etc.?
So I think you touch a good point. So firstly, data is now available that assists us to be able to map the country's topology, to understand just exactly where are the highest risks of floods. And I think that information actually needs to be incorporated into the planning to make sure that we actually use a risk-based approach, because we know that when floods come, we actually need to concentrate our efforts firstly in those high-risk areas. So that will assist the proactive planning on the ground. I think that will also ensure that we first protect lives when you have such incidents. Then I think correct. Hopefully that helps.
All right, Clifford, yes, the conversation continues, but thank you for weighing in. Of course, we're looking at what's transpired in the aftermath of the devastating floods that hit the Eastern Cape, various other parts of the country, and really what the approach is going to be from here and to, if we're looking at the impact that climate change has had from here and to beyond. Clifford Mack, thank you for joining us at this hour. Let's leave the conversation there. We keep talking, we keep the conversations going from the impact of climate change on South Africa at large.